We get all the fun topics, right, in the Proverbs. Ones that we just love to talk about, money and our words. And, well, tonight's another one of those fun topics. Anger. Now, no one struggles, no problems here, so we'll just close out. I'll just say another prayer and we'll just be right. We got this one down. I need to get my, clicker's in my pocket. What am I doing? Yeah. Let's see here. Let's see if that's on. There we go. So, there's not a one of us, that doesn't struggle at times to some degree with this topic. So we're all in the same boat. We're all aware that this is one of those subjects that every person has to deal with. And so, I was thinking about, and I love history, and I love stories about the great figures in history. Alexander the Great. I remember one time I was reading one historian that said, very few people that have been labeled or given some sort of that description of being great, very few have deserved it. Very, very few people really deserve it. And he went on to say, however, in the case of Alexander the Great, he deserved it. He was the great conqueror, right? Incredible what he accomplished in a very short period of life that really changed the world even to this very day, right? The effects and the work that the conquering and everything that spread through the Greek culture that he had. He was energetic. He was versatile. He was intelligent. He was adaptable. He was just really good at what he did. However, Alexander the Great, it is stated, at times struggled with his temper, his temperament, his anger. The story is told on an occasion and he had a dear friend that was a general of his, and they had went up together and conquered and fought alongside each other, and so this was a dear. Well, this general was intoxicated one evening, and he had kind of had a little bit of much of Alexander the Great's notoriety, and that he even at one point, I guess, in the conversation had pointed to his sword or his spear and said, "I've saved your life many a times with this." And anyway, Alexander the Great had had enough of that, and he lashed out. And he actually threw his spear just trying to get it close to him, but he actually pierced him and killed his general friend. And it is stated that he struggled with this for a while, even attempted to take his own life. And so the great the great conqueror with the spear, so to speak, struggled mightily with conquering his own temperament, his own anger, and it led to a lot of issues, and that was just one that is noteworthy that historians have talked about. Now, as Christians, we're not to be known as people of anger. What are we to be known for? What's our spirit to be known for? Okay, peaceful, contentment. Okay, what else? Well, so love. Yeah, Tony. Patience, kindness. Yeah, all the fruits of the Spirit. Yeah, we're not called to be an angry people, quick-tempered. We're called to be self-controlled. And as Ron said, the fruit of the Spirit. Now, here's a question as we start with, as we think about this. How how do you identify if you have an anger issue or struggle or problem? You don't have any friends? Well, I mean, that's a lot of truth to that. A lot of truth to that. What else? What are the other things that might be indicators that we can help identify some of the characteristics that we struggle with that? Red hair. Oh, the genetics. I was born this way. Well, what else? What's characteristics? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. There's some distinctions here, and we'll talk about that in just a second. We're not. The sin is not in being angry. Okay. The sin is in what you do. It is impossible to live your life and not get angry. I dare you. I challenge you. You're not. If you're not, I want to poke you. I want to get up your pulse. The sin is not in being angry. And of course, the example, and we'll get to this in just a moment. We're not getting it to yet because the brethren like to run to this example. But who was angry and did not sin? Jesus. All right, we'll get to it, but we're not there yet, so don't even think about it. Because you and every other member in the church thinks, well, Jesus got angry and didn't sin, so I could blah, blah, blah. We're going to get to that. But right now, let's stay on the point. So, Rhonda's absolutely. We are impatient. We don't listen to others, right? What else comes to mind? Self-centered, selfish. What do we assume often that creates our anger with intentions of others? Well, they blame for that, but they also, what do they assume about the other person, what they did or said, or their actions? Well, they did that, she did that because what? She don't like me. They cut me. Did you see them cut me off in traffic? Well, I just made an assumption, right? That they what? That they did it on purpose. What if they didn't see you? You know what? How often do our haste assumptions get us in trouble with our temper? When we assume what? Others have bad motive, intent. And so, yeah, there's all sorts of all sorts of things here that that create this the struggle. So let's look at a few here from Proverbs. Some of these are a little more general, but there'll be a few that'll be specific. I would say one would be just the general foolish in actions. Foolish in action. Somebody read Proverbs 14 and 17. Who'd like to read that for us? Proverbs 14, 17. Okay, Dolores. Okay, the quick-tempered man acts what? Acts without, what would we say, thinking, giving thought to what they're going to do, what they're going to say, thinking through it, right? Taking a moment to be patient, to pause. Yeah. I love what Benjamin Franklin said here. Whatever is begun in anger ends in shame. Like he knew what he was talking about. Pretty smart guy. And how often have we said and done things foolishly in anger that we later what? Terribly regret. Why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why did I so rashly speak and act? Yeah, Roy? Right. Yeah, yeah. That being embarrassed and shamed is kind of, yeah. And that's a good example, real good example. Someone read Proverbs also 14 and verse 29. Who's got that? Okay, Roy, Proverbs 14:29.
He who is slow to wrath has great understanding, but he who is impulsive exalts folly.
Okay, so what's the correlation? What's the relationship between slow to anger and having understanding? Let's put those two together. How is those two married? Slow to anger leads to understanding. Why is that? Okay, they're patient. Yeah, learn more when we're patient. We got time to what? Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. What else? Anything come to mind there? Yeah, Lucy? Uh-huh. Think before they act? Yes. Yeah, Matt? Yeah. Why do we assume the worst, right, with other people so often? We so quick to, like I said, assume the worst. Another thing that kind of this really hits on is, someone talked about, I think it was Kevin who mentioned it, selfishness. I mean, that's really what drives a lot of our anger is, how dare that person get in front of me in the highway? I deserve to get there first. We often, so much of our anger is fueled by our selfishness that we think we deserve and should and have, and when it doesn't go our way, we get upset. Yeah. Pride. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's right. That's right. I deserve the best of everything. And so I can get, by any slight of anything, I can get angry. But yeah, go ahead, Rhonda. Right. Hmm. Yes. Hmm. Right. No. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Hmm. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Those that technology is it's a blessing and a curse at times. I like what she's saying, because I think for most people, anger is a learned behavior, and that's where children come into play. When why, why is that important that children learn to control their anger? Why is that important that they learn? That's what we're talking about, isn't it? That it's a developed, learned behavior, and it starts when they're little bitty, right? That they learn not to what? Throw a what? What do we call that? Temper tantrum, right? And that's there's nothing funny and cute about it when they're 3. I got to tell you, there's nothing funny when they're 30 or 43. And they're still acting that way because they haven't learned to deal with that. It's a learned behavior. Yeah, Matt? Yeah, no, anger is a learned behavior, is what I'm saying. Yeah. Well, again, the issue, I would say, the distinction is the emotion of anger is, we can't control that as far as we can, but we can't. We're going to get angry. That's right. What I'm saying is the reaction and the response is where I would say so I'd clarify, yeah, what you're saying. I agree. We can't instinctively, it's going to happen, but we don't have to open our mouth. We don't have to throw a temper tantrum. We don't have to get ugly. And so that's where it's a learned behavior. The child sees it. And by the way, he sees mom and dad. Let me just say this. He sees mom and dad. And I got to tell you, I grew up in a home where there was anger issues with my father. And I made it a goal that I was not going to be that way with my children. Now, I've been at times gotten angry with them, yes. But I've had to work on that because that was something that was learned in my growing up with a short fuse, and certainly with my spouse who's in here. So I have to be careful that she don't call me on it. But I've tried not to, certainly in public. There's been a few times privately we've had it out, but tried not to lash out on my wife, right? Because number one, it's not right. But I've got 3 children, and what are they watching? What are they learning from that? And so it is a natural feeling that we all have, but it's a learned behavior, how we deal with it, how we respond. And anyway, did anybody see a hand? Anybody else have a comment on that? We got some teachers in here, so you jump in too if you see that, how it's a learned behavior in the response. Yes, Maggie. Mm, right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So I think it's important here that we learn the response and how to deal with our anger. We know it's going to be an issue. We're all going to have it. We're not talking about that as far as that emotion, that it's that what we do with that response. And so reacting in foolish ways. Let me quickly here. We got to get going. Stir up trouble with anger. This is again, we're talking about not someone who just naturally, we all struggle. We're talking about someone who lives in anger, someone who feeds and fosters this as a trait in how they respond to people in life is what we're talking about. Proverbs, let's read these. Proverbs 29:22. Who's got that? Proverbs 29:22. Okay, so she. And then someone get Proverbs 15:18. Ron, I think you had a hand up. Okay, Proverbs 29:22. So she. Okay, an angry man stirs up strife. That anger spills over with other people. They agitate others. They stir up others. They escalate others. It's infectious. It's toxic, and they often enjoy that. They often like to see that. They like to pit people against each other. There's just people who get their kicks out of that. They like to watch people go at each other and say and do things and react in ways that will certainly do that. There's an old, this is a preacher joke, okay, but about the guy who thought he had rabies, and he goes to the doctor and they run the test, and the doctor says, "Yep, you've got rabies." The guy immediately gets out a pad and pencil, starts writing things down. The doctor's like, does he think he's going to die? We've got a cure for that. And he tells the man, hey, you're not going to die. We've got a cure for that. And he says, I know. I'm writing a list of all the people I want to bite. Now, some people go around and they like to what? They just like to bite people. They enjoy that. And that they stir things up, and they say things, and they do things in ways that that do that. Okay, Proverbs 15:18, Ron.
A hot-tempered man stirs up dissension, but a patient man calms a quarrel.
Ah, there we go, right? That's what we were talking about earlier. A patient person is able to, their efforts, it's not that they can do it every time, but what are they trying to do when there's problems and tension and strife and heated emotions? They're trying to what? De-escalate it, calm it down, tone it down, bring the volume down, right? And the person who thrives on that just wants to crank it up a notch or 10 times. They're just not happy unless they're fighting. And people are fussing. Ecclesiastes 7:9. Let's put our finger here in Proverbs, but this is wisdom literature. Okay, yeah. This idea, it resides, it sits in the foolish person. And there's a difference between the spike of emotion. Matt and I were kind of making that distinction. We're going to have reactions. We're going to have natural reactions, yes, that deal with our emotions and anger, versus sitting with it, letting it grow and fester and lash out and act upon it, and in what we do and what we say, and dwelling in on the anger. And so, do you think about an example like Saul not Saul of Tarsus, Saul in the Old Testament? King Saul. He allowed, of course, his selfishness, his pride, right? Dolores was talking about, to get the best of him, so that what he ended up doing towards David. Tried to kill him. Go back to that, right? The spear with Alexander the Great. Literally what? King Saul was throwing it at David. And it was a great part of his downfall. Here's a test. The people that know you best, would they say generally you're an angry person? Wow, that could be a real doozy. If we had to ask some of the people that are closest to us, would they describe us as generally being a person who's angry? And so let's. Okay, let me get here quickly. Here we got to get going. Number 3, they never learn from the lessons of their mistakes when it comes to anger. Proverbs 19:19. Who's got that? Proverbs 19:19. I'd like to read that. Okay, Kevin. Another way we would say, I think that saying is, they're going to keep repeating. The angry person, the person who is controlled by their passions, their emotions, the hot-tempered, the impatient, you rescue them, you're going to do what? It's just going to keep happening because they don't learn from it. They keep repeating it. And how many times have you seen that in individuals who have suffered the consequences, and then they turn around and they, what? 2 weeks later, a week later, a day later, they're doing the same thing again. They can't keep a job, right? Maybe because of their temper, something that they're doing, and they get fired or whatever, and I'm going to learn from this, and they get back in it, and they keep repeating it. Yes, go ahead. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's unfortunately for a lot of people that do know that how many marriages have been destroyed because of that anger, that temper? I mean, it leads to other things. I understand that, but and other problems come out of that, and other things that feed into that. But I'm just saying, and they can get counseling, and they can read scripture, and they can hear lessons about it, but they continue to act upon that, and it continues to be their downfall in so many ways, and so they don't learn the lessons from their anger. What are you angry about?
They'll deny it.
Right.
I'm not angry. What do you mean I'm angry? I'm not angry.
Yes.
I'm not angry at anything.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll deny it while they're shouting and yelling, right? I'm not angry. Why do you ask me that, right? uh, yeah, it's real important, and so a hot-tempered, quick, is a very, very. And then lastly, here I would say we're going to look at some ways to overcome. They're toxic to others. Look at Proverbs 22. Who's got Proverbs 22, 24, and 25? Proverbs 22, 24, and 25. Okay, Susan? Look at that, what that verse is saying. Don't be close bond, close ties, close friendship with someone who doesn't control their emotions, who's angry. Why? What's he say there?
Bad habits are learned.
Bad habits are learned. Yeah. Angie? Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Well, we see that. We see the violence in our schools. We see the violence in our society. I mean, Stephen was telling me right before as he walked in, he about got road raged here coming into town. I mean, just people will just they'll run you over. They're just and that's why I said this is not just instinctively we all struggle. No, they weren't doing this 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago like this. Young people weren't walking in schools angry, hating everything, and want to shoot people, and 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds that would punch a teacher. And this is a learned behavior that we're seeing in our society. And it's going to be our great downfall, and it's a crisis. It's an epidemic, I'll tell you, for young men, because we're just putting them in prison. We are just filling up prisons left and right with young men who are so angry, and it's a great problem in our society. I know young ladies, it's also an issue as well. But okay, let's quickly here. Let's move on. I got to get to some. So what I would say there is, you can't disassociate from everybody, right, in the world. But you don't have to what? Draw them in and become best buddies and associate, hang out with them all the time. Because as Roy said, it's a learned behavior. And I got to tell you, of course, I got kids and they're going to marry, Lord willing, marry one day. And but especially for daughters, for girls, I've had to have these counsel. If your boyfriend already has angry issues, you need to run to the hills. You need to break up. He just, his dad had a temper, and I used to kind of molly, kind of wishy-washy, and now I just say, you need to break up with him. Well, you really? Yes. Because you know what happens with that anger. He didn't mean it. He's just, right? We know what that's going to lead to. Yeah, I won't do it again. And so, like I said, I promise, and this, that, and the other. And now I'm just like, you just run for the hills if you're in a relationship with someone who can't control their emotions like that. And you let somebody else reach them and convert them and whatever. But that's not what marriage is for. I know some of you have changed your spouse, helped your spouses and all that, but it's a very huge red flag to someone, and Proverbs says, get away from them. Don't join up with them. All right, let me give you some things here. First of all, we're just about out of time. All right, I know what all of you are thinking, because it's what we go to justify our anger at times. well, Jesus, didn't he get angry? Actually, there's 5 occasions in the text in the Gospels. You've got one where the withered man, where Jesus says, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath? And remember, they don't say a word. And the text says he became indignant. He became angry. They wouldn't even say that it's okay to help this man. Tradition is that he was probably masonry or some sort of work with his hand. Obviously, had been crushed. Maybe there was no workers' comp back then, right? And Jesus was indignant. Another occasion is when they try to shoo off the children. Remember that? And Jesus became indignant. The word there is he began to shudder. You ever seen someone whose lip starts to quiver? What are they about to sometimes do? Cry, and you probably ought to take a few steps, because they're about to blow. Jesus started to quiver when they forbid the children. And he said, what? Stop that. You let them come to me. Well, of course, you guys are all going to the temple, right? You weren't even thinking about those, maybe. But yes, when he saw that they had turned God's house of worship into a den of thieves. And so we say, righteous what? Indignation. Well, we just pat ourselves on the back and we just use that as an excuse often, I think, has been my experience, that I'm righteously. What's the difference between Jesus' righteous indignation and our often righteous indignation? First of all, it was for what, Tony? He's God, but just he's standing up for the things of God. Yeah. He wasn't selfishly, right, protecting himself because, by the way, Jesus got insulted. Jesus got persecuted. Jesus got spat upon. Jesus got, they tried to get him, the Pharisees, every step of the way. And so Jesus did not personally retaliate even when he was personally wronged. And that's where a lot of ours factors into often. This is when God's honor was at stake, God's truth. And so, yes, there is a time and a place for righteous indignation. It's just not as much as we think it is my experience in dealing with church people. Yeah, it gets out of control, and it's easy to get our pride mixed in there, and we think we're defending God, and often we're just defending our own selfish pride and ego, and so. But yes, there is a time and a place to have righteous anger, and when God's name and God's honor and God's purpose is. And so I definitely would. It's not a sin to have. And so I'd say this. All right, let me quickly how to deal with it. Let's run through this here. Number one, restrain it. We talked about this. James 1. Everybody look at this verse. You know it, but I want you to look at it, all of us. Can't find a more clear-cut verse right here in this regard. James 1 and verse 19. James 1:19. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Human anger does not produce God's righteousness. James is very clear here. We make assumptions. We're quick to judge. We're quick to apply motives to others. We are selfishly protecting or defending our own ego and our own, and he says this does not lead to the righteousness of God. And so we need to restrain it. We need to look at Colossians 3 and verse 8 here, quickly here. Just almost out of time. Colossians 3 and verse 8. I like what he says here. Colossians 3 and verse 8. But now you must rid yourself of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, excuse me, filthy language from your lips. But anger, he starts off with there, you need to get rid of it. You need to put it away. You need to identify it. Look at Proverbs 29:11 here. We're running out of time. I'm going to have to shotgun fire these here. Proverbs 29 and verse 11. Proverbs 29 and verse 11. Okay. Wise man restrains. Wise man identifies. Yes, there's a holy anger. We've talked about that. But there's an unholy. And we want to restrain that. We need to deal with it immediately. Ephesians 4:26. Do not, well, let's just look at that one verse here. I wanted to read that one. Ephesians 4:26. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. And do not give the devil a foothold. The last part of that is very important. He's saying deal with it, okay? Deal with your emotions. Deal with your anger. I've had couples who've said, we don't go to bed angry. And that's okay for you. But sometimes it's okay, even if you can't get it resolved, to go ahead and go to bed. But deal with it soon. Deal with it soon. And don't let that fester. Don't let that linger for days and days. Resolve that anger, because the devil will use that as an opening for all sorts of things. And so deal with it immediately. 3, surrender it to God's grace. Colossians 3:13. Look what back to Colossians now. Colossians 3:13. Bear with one another and forgive one another. If any of you have a grievance against someone, forgive, as the Lord forgave you. And above all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. And so we've got to learn forgiveness. We've got to give way to God's grace and God's mercy to us when we were sinners, and extend that, be willing to extend that to others. And we talked about that last week a little bit, a few weeks ago, about what forgiveness is, what it doesn't mean, but forgiveness is a big part of our anger issues often. And then last, I would say, find the true source of it. Remember what the Lord says to Cain? Yeah, look at Genesis 4 and verse 6. So you know the familiar story with Cain and Abel. And Genesis 4, and the Lord comes to him and says, why are you, what? Angry. Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door, and it desires to have you. I mean, God's given Cain another chance. What was the problem? Cain did not offer the right sacrifice, right? And his brother did, and what did God do with his brother's offering? That was the source, wasn't it? That was the source. And God comes and says, I would say, let's do that again, Cain. Let's do a redo. Let's do a do-over. Do you want to try that again? God is giving him a second chance to make the appropriate sacrifice. But he is so enraged with his anger towards his brother and his pride. And you know what happens. He eventually, of course, will kills his brother as a result of that. So often we have real sources of our anger. We have to deal with it. And you've probably seen that with someone maybe at work or in family, and they blow up out of nowhere over the slightest little thing, and what is really going on though, right? Something deeper. Something is the culmination, has been building and building, that needs to be addressed. And so we often need to find the source of it. And so when people see us, what do they see? Do they see people who have anger? Or do they see us with love and kindness and compassion and patience? When I think about God, I don't think about anger. There was times I did, just because of the way I was brought up a little bit. And that's just some of our emphasis on to be right and God's holiness, and yes, that's all a part of the Bible. But when I think of God now and Jesus, I don't think of anger. I don't think of anger.
I can see why God could be angry.
Yes.
People do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's not going to.
For God so loved. Yeah. Yeah. And so when we think about us, we want to think about being people of love and patience and kindness and goodness. And yes, when it's right and appropriate, righteous indignation, yes, we need to stand up for things and for God. But we need to be known as people who are not people of anger. So, all right, we will pick up there next time with another fun topic. I promise you, right? Nah, we'll